My name is James Carter, and for as long as I can remember, our family had been the picture of unity and warmth. Victoria, my wife, and I had built a life steeped in love, shared dreams, and traditions passed down through generations. Among our many cherished customs was the annual celebration of our child's milestones. This year, as we prepared for our baby's gender party, a joyous event that was meant to herald a new beginning, I could not have imagined that beneath the festive veneer, an unimaginable betrayal was silently taking shape. The weeks leading up to the party were filled with excitement and anxious anticipation. Victoria busied herself with the decorations, planning every detail with the meticulous care that had always defined her. I admired her enthusiasm as she arranged pastel balloons, delicate streamers, and a cake adorned with soft pinks and blues. Our friends and family had been invited, and the day was shaping up to be a perfect celebration of new life and hope. Yet, amid the laughter and busy preparations, I began to notice subtle changes in Victoria's behavior. At first, they were almost imperceptible, a hesitance before answering my questions about her schedule, a secretive smile when she checked her phone, and an uncharacteristic distance in her eyes whenever my gaze lingered too long. I tried to brush these off as mere pre-party jitters. After all, such events could stir emotions and stress, even in the most loving of hearts. One chilly evening, as I was tidying up the guest list on my laptop, I caught a glimpse of Victoria in the hallway. She was absorbed in a quiet conversation on the phone. Her tone was soft and measured, but as I listened, I couldn't help but feel that there was a hidden subtext behind her words, a coded language that hinted at secrets she hadn't shared with me. I told myself that I was being overly suspicious. After all, our marriage had always been built on trust. Still, a gnawing unease began to take root in the depths of my mind. As the day of the party drew nearer, that unease deepened. I found myself retracing every shared moment of the past few months, each smile, each lingering glance, and wondering if I had overlooked the subtle signs of a growing divide between us. In quiet moments, as I sat alone in the study with a cup of coffee, I recalled instances when Victoria's eyes would wander toward the corner of the room as if expecting someone, a furtive look that vanished as quickly as it came. I dismissed these memories as nothing more than fleeting doubts, until one particular incident shattered my complacency. Late one afternoon, while Victoria stepped out to pick up supplies for the party, I discovered an envelope tucked away on our kitchen counter. It was unmarked, with no return address or note, just a slip of paper containing a brief message. Some truths are hidden where you least expect them. My heart pounded as I tried to decipher the meaning. Was it a cruel prank? Or did it hint at something far more sinister? I couldn't shake the chill that ran down my spine as I folded the paper and hid it away, unsure if I should confront Victoria immediately or wait for the right moment. In the days that followed, the envelope's cryptic message haunted my thoughts. Every time Victoria excused herself to make a call or check on party details, I found myself watching from a distance, desperate to glean some insight into her secret world. The more I observed, the more I began to notice interactions that didn't add up, whispers in a tone that wasn't meant for me, a lingering touch on her phone that suggested a closeness with someone I didn't know. I knew I was treading dangerous ground, yet the need to understand overwhelmed my better judgment. I tried to keep up appearances, joining in the excited chatter about the upcoming party and laughing along with family members who reminisced about past celebrations. But behind the smiles, I felt a growing isolation, a sense that my world was slowly unraveling at the seams. The thought that Victoria could hide such a vast chasm of secrets from me, especially on the eve of what should have been our happiest day, was too much to bear. Late one night, unable to sleep, I retreated to our study and opened an old family album. There, amidst joyful snapshots of birthday parties and holiday gatherings, I saw a faded photograph of my grandfather, Edward Carter, a man I had always revered for his wisdom and kind demeanor. He had been a guiding force in our family, a pillar of strength whose life story was woven into the fabric of our history. I had always admired him, and his presence at family events was a comfort. Yet, a nagging thought crept into my mind. Had Victoria ever spoken of him in a tone that hinted at something more than reverence? I could not recall, but the seed of doubt had been planted. In that quiet, solitary moment, I resolved that I would keep my observations to myself a little longer, watching and waiting for clarity. The party was just a few days away, and I desperately hoped that the celebration might wash away my suspicions. I clung to the hope that perhaps my mind was playing tricks on me, that the stress of the upcoming event had clouded my judgment. As I prepared for bed, the envelope's words echoed in my mind, mingling with the images of family portraits and happy memories. I wondered if some truths were indeed hidden in plain sight, and if I was about to uncover a secret that would shatter the life I thought I knew. Unbeknownst to me, the coming days would force me to confront a betrayal so profound that it would forever alter the course of my life. The morning of the gender party dawned bright and clear, belying the turmoil churning within me. I awoke early, determined to put on a brave face for Victoria and our guests, even as a storm of doubt swirled in my mind. Today was supposed to be a celebration of new beginnings, a day to honor the precious life growing inside Victoria and to share in the joy of our expanding family. But as I dressed in my best suit and glanced at the carefully arranged decorations, I couldn't shake the feeling that this day would mark the beginning of a painful reckoning. As the clock ticked closer to the start of the party, our home transformed into a scene of festive elegance. A table laden with delicacies, sparkling drinks, and a magnificent cake became the centerpiece of our living room. The air buzzed with light-hearted chatter and laughter as friends and family arrived, each greeted warmly by Victoria. Despite her radiant smile, I noticed the occasional fleeting look in her eyes, one that seemed to search the room, as if expecting someone. I tried to dismiss it as mere pre-party nerves, but the sense of foreboding persisted. Among the guests was Edward Carter, my beloved grandfather. His presence had always been a source of comfort and wisdom for me, and seeing him share hearty greetings with everyone brought back memories of simpler, happier times. As the party progressed, I couldn't help but observe Victoria's interactions with him. At first, they appeared entirely normal, a loving granddaughter and a doting grandfather exchanging affectionate banter. Yet, as I watched, I caught subtle nuances, a gentle touch on his arm that lingered a bit too long, and a soft murmur that passed between them when I wasn't paying close attention. The tension in my chest grew heavier with each passing hour. I busied myself with small tasks, ensuring that the drinks were refilled, mingling with the guests, and even trying to engage in cheerful conversation, but every so often, I found my eyes drawn to the quiet corner of the room where Victoria and Edward would occasionally converse in hushed tones. I tried to convince myself that there was nothing untoward about it. After all, family ties ran deep, and perhaps their closeness was nothing more than affection. Yet, deep down, an unsettling thought began to crystallize. The turning point of the day arrived unexpectedly during a planned moment of celebration. As the guests gathered around the cake for the traditional gender reveal, a moment when pink or blue confetti would burst forth to signal the future of our child, a hush fell over the room. Victoria stepped forward to make a brief speech, her eyes sparkling with what appeared to be joy and anticipation. I joined her on stage, clapping along with the guests as we awaited the reveal. But even then, my gaze involuntarily drifted to the back of the room, where Edward and Victoria had shared a quiet, intense look moments before. The reveal was dramatic. A shower of colored confetti exploded into the air, eliciting cheers and applause. For a fleeting moment, it felt as if the entire room had been swept up in a tide of happiness. I forced a smile and joined in the applause, but my mind was elsewhere. In the midst of the celebration, I caught a glimpse of Victoria slipping away from the group, her expression guarded and her pace brisk. I excused myself under the pretext of checking on the refreshments, determined to follow her discreetly and discover the source of her secretive behavior. I trailed Victoria into a quiet hallway near the back of our home. The sounds of laughter and celebration faded behind me as I approached her. There, in the dim light of a side room, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Victoria was engaged in a hushed conversation with none other than Edward Carter. Their body language was intimate, so close that any bystander would have assumed they were sharing a private moment of tenderness. I froze, unable to comprehend the scene before me. My mind raced. How could the man I had idolized, my own grandfather, be entwined in something so forbidden with the woman I had loved and trusted? In that instant, every memory, the subtle glances, the secretive smiles, the unexplained hesitations converged into one crushing truth. My heart pounded in my chest as I struggled to process the revelation. Was this a moment of innocent affection misinterpreted by my anxious mind? Or was it the unmistakable evidence of betrayal? My throat constricted with a mix of shock and despair. The joyous celebration of new life had turned into the stage for an unimaginable act of infidelity. Before I could gather my thoughts, a hushed voice reached my ears. James. It was Victoria, her voice trembling with a mixture of defiance and regret. I stepped forward, my eyes locked on the pair, as the reality of the moment sank in. I demanded, in a voice that shook with both pain and incredulity, "What is this? What are you doing here with him?" Her eyes filled with tears as she struggled to find the words. For a long, excruciating moment, The only sounds were the distant echoes of the party and the rapid beating of my heart. I knew that in that small, shadowed room, my world was irrevocably changing. The woman I had trusted and the man I had revered had betrayed me in a way that defied comprehension. The celebration outside continued unabated, blissfully unaware of the storm that had erupted within our walls. I stood there, paralyzed by a mixture of heartbreak and disbelief, knowing that nothing would ever be the same again. In the suffocating silence of that hidden room, the shock of what I had witnessed gave way to a torrent of raw emotions, anger, sorrow, and a deep, gnawing betrayal that cut through me like a jagged blade. My voice, hoarse from the sudden outburst, demanded answers that I knew might never come. "Victoria, explain this now," I pleaded, my eyes darting between her tear-streaked face and my grandfather, Edward, whose expression was a mix of shame and sorrow. Victoria's hands trembled as she attempted to speak. "James, I never meant for it to happen," she stammered, her words faltering under the weight of the moment. But her explanation, as desperate as it sounded, only deepened the chasm between us. How could the woman I had vowed to love and cherish betray me in such a way, on the day we were meant to celebrate the future of our child, no less? Edward's eyes, normally so kind and steady, now brimmed with regret. "James, I am so sorry," he whispered, his voice laden with a sorrow that I had never associated with the man I once admired. His presence in our lives had always been a source of guidance and strength, and now it felt like a cruel twist of fate that he would be part of this betrayal. The room seemed to shrink around me as I struggled to reconcile the images of the loving family I once knew with the painful reality unfolding before me. The confrontation escalated quickly. Words flew like shards of broken glass, accusations mingled with desperate attempts at explanation. Victoria tried to tell me of a loneliness she had felt, of moments when she believed our life had grown too predictable and stifling. She claimed that her connection with Edward was born out of a need for understanding and warmth, something she felt had been missing from our relationship. But every word only stoked the flames of my indignation. The idea that my wife could seek solace in the arms of my own grandfather was an affront I could scarcely bear. "Solace," I repeated bitterly, my voice trembling with fury. "You found solace in someone who has been part of my entire life, a man I looked up to, who was like a father to me. How could you let our sacred family bonds be so utterly desecrated?" My words echoed off the bare walls, each one punctuating the depth of my despair. I felt as though my heart were being dismantled piece by piece, the foundations of our shared history crumbling beneath the weight of this shocking betrayal. As the confrontation wore on, I could feel the eyes of the few remaining guests outside the door, the distant sounds of celebration now a stark contrast to the chaos in that room. I was acutely aware that the sanctity of our family event had been violated, that the very joy we had hoped to share with our child was now irrevocably tainted by this act of treachery. Victoria's eyes pleaded for forgiveness, for understanding. "I never wanted to hurt you, James," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I was lost, and I made a terrible mistake." Her remorse, however, did nothing to soothe the raw wound that had been inflicted. I struggled to maintain composure as tears of anguish welled up, blurring my vision. The man I once loved had become a stranger who had willingly destroyed the trust that had defined our marriage and our family. In that heart-wrenching moment, I realized that nothing could ever bring back the innocence of our past. The betrayal was absolute, and the damage irreparable. I turned away, unable to face the sight of the two people I had trusted most in the world. With a shaking hand, I clutched my phone, determined to call for help, even if it meant shattering the remaining fragments of my dignity. Yet, even as I reached for it, a final, desperate plea from Victoria stopped me in my tracks. "James, please, let's talk about this, please," she cried, her voice barely audible. But there was no conversation left to be had in that moment. The gulf between us had grown too vast, too deep to bridge with words. The echoes of betrayal reverberated through the room, leaving me numb and hollow. I realized that the man I once was, capable of forgiveness and unconditional love, was slipping away, replaced by a broken version of myself who could no longer trust the very foundation of his existence. As I stood there, paralyzed by a mix of fury and sorrow, I knew that this confrontation would mark the end of our shared life. The joyous celebration outside had become the backdrop to the unthinkable, and I was left with the unbearable truth. The bonds of trust and love that had once held us together were now shattered beyond repair. In that painful instant, I made the decision that my life could never be the same again. With a heavy heart and tear-streaked face, I turned and left the room, each step echoing with the finality of a love lost. The images of Victoria and Edward, once figures of comfort and familial pride, would forever be etched in my memory as symbols of the ultimate betrayal. I stepped out into the party, determined to confront the reality of the day, even as I carried the weight of this unutterable secret with me. In the aftermath of that devastating confrontation, the joyous echoes of the gender party were replaced by a profound silence that seemed to suffocate every corner of our once happy home. I retreated into solitude, my mind a tumult of shattered memories and unanswered questions. The events of that day, when a celebration of new life had been marred by the most unthinkable betrayal, would haunt me for years to come. Yet, even amid the despair, I knew that I had reached a crossroads, to let the betrayal define me or to forge a new path toward healing. In the days that followed, I found myself oscillating between numb disbelief and searing pain. I avoided the stares of our relatives and the pitying glances of old friends who had witnessed the unraveling of our family's facade. Every time I passed by the remnants of the party, the deflated balloons, the untouched cake, the echoes of laughter that now seemed like distant memories, I was reminded of the profound loss of trust and love. It felt as if the very foundation of my identity had been shaken, and I struggled to reconcile the man I had once been with the person who now stood before a world that no longer made sense. In the solitude of my study, I began to write. Every night, I poured my heart onto the pages of a journal, a desperate attempt to make sense of the chaos that had overtaken my life. I recounted every detail, the secret glances, the whispered conversations, and the heart-wrenching confrontation, in an effort to capture not just the betrayal, but the pain, confusion, and gradual realization that sometimes the truth comes at an unbearable cost. With each word, I began to confront the reality that my family had been irrevocably altered, and that I must now find the strength to rebuild from the ruins. The shock of learning that Victoria had betrayed me with my own grandfather cut deeper than I ever thought possible. Edward Carter had been a revered figure in our family, a living symbol of love, tradition, and continuity. The notion that he could be involved in this tangled web of deceit felt like a betrayal on two fronts. Not only had I lost the trust of the woman I loved, but a pillar of my familial legacy had also been tarnished. I wrestled with a bitter cocktail of anger and sorrow, struggling to understand how those I once held dear could commit such an act. Yet, in the midst of my anguish, I began to realize that healing might lie in accepting the pain and learning from it. I sought solace in long walks through the quiet streets of our neighborhood, where the soft rustle of autumn leaves and the gentle whisper of the wind reminded me that nature, in its unyielding beauty, always found a way to move forward. Slowly, I started to see that while the scars of betrayal might never completely vanish, they could, in time, transform into marks of survival, a testament to my ability to endure and eventually rise above the darkest moments. Family gatherings, once a source of comfort, now felt like minefields of painful memories and accusatory stares. I began to distance myself from the remnants of the old life, retreating into my own world where I could process the events at my own pace. There were moments of isolation when the silence felt overwhelming and the weight of loss threatened to drown me. But in those moments, I also discovered an inner resilience that I had long forgotten. I began to reconnect with friends who reminded me of the man I used to be, someone capable of love, of laughter, and of rebuilding even after the most devastating of blows. One crisp morning, as I sat by the window watching the sunrise paint the sky with hues of gold and crimson, I finally acknowledged a truth that had been buried beneath the layers of hurt. I had a choice. I could allow this betrayal to define me, or I could let it be the catalyst for a new beginning, a painful yet transformative journey towards self-discovery and renewal. The decision was not easy, and the road ahead was uncertain, but I resolved that I would no longer be a victim of circumstance. I would reclaim my narrative piece by piece and strive to build a life where honesty and integrity could flourish once more. In the months that followed, I began taking small steps to mend my fractured identity. I sought professional guidance and immersed myself in creative pursuits, writing, photography, and even volunteering in community projects to rediscover parts of myself that had lain dormant under the weight of sorrow. Each day, though marked by the memory of that fateful gender party, became an opportunity to learn, to grow, and to redefine what it meant to truly live. The echoes of that day would always linger in my mind, the laughter that turned to shock, the celebration that dissolved into bitter confrontation, and the faces of those who had once represented love and family now shrouded in betrayal. Yet, in accepting the pain, I discovered that healing is not about forgetting or erasing the past, but about embracing every fragment of it and finding the strength to move forward despite it all. Now, as I sit here writing these final words, I know that my journey is far from over. The scars of betrayal may never fully fade, but they have become a part of me, a reminder of the fragility of trust and the resilience of the human spirit. In the quiet moments of reflection, I no longer view the past solely as a series of painful memories, but as stepping stones on the path to a future defined by authenticity and hope. Though the celebration of new life had been marred by a betrayal so profound it defied explanation, it also forced me to confront the truth about who I was and what I truly valued. I choose now to honor that truth by moving forward, with a cautious optimism that the light of a new day will eventually heal even the deepest wounds. And so, with each sunrise, I step into the future scarred, yes, but also stronger, more resolute, and ready to embrace a life built on the honest, hard-won lessons of the past.